up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today's video, we are back with another episode of Lions Latest, going through the latest Detroit Lions news. And today, we're going to be doing an injury report update. We haven't done a ton of these videos by themselves this season, but today we are. We're going to update the latest injury report from the Lions and the Broncos, the designations that we have so far. The week has been moved up because we play on Saturday. And we're also going to talk about some major news that we have on a star player that could be returning soon. So let's get it started. Welcome everybody to the video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, man, we are back with another episode of Lions Latest. And we haven't done a ton of these videos on their own. Tomorrow I plan to do some sort of preview type of video, whether that's a pre-recorded video, some sort of live stream. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to go down, but that's going to take place tomorrow. I wanted to dive into this mainly because of the news that we had. Now, the injury report, it's looking pretty good. And there's some real things on here that we need to talk about will, of course, impact us in Saturday's game. But the big news, while we won't see it take place on Saturday, it's happening. And if you haven't seen it yet, you don't know what I'm talking about, let's get right into it. Ceedy Duce has been medically cleared to return to the Detroit Lions. If you don't know who Ceedy Duce is, it's CJ Gardner-Johnson, the safety slash slot that we signed this offseason, but he's looked really good at safety. We kept him at safety, but he was injured very early in the season against the Seattle Seahawks. And the reports were, man, this guy is done for the season. However, just a few weeks ago, and we've been getting these little nuggets, they've just been sprinkling some little things like, he might actually be able to come back. And he's kind of like left the door open, like he might be able to come back. Dan Campbell left the door open. Now, Dan Campbell, while he left the door open, he didn't make it sound like, yeah, this is definitely going to happen. It was kind of like, I'm not going to say it won't happen because this guy's going to work his butt off to get back. But I'm also not going to say that I expect him to be back this season. However, a few weeks ago, we had this post, I think it was a few weeks ago, we had this post on Ceedy Duce's Instagram that said this, December 20th. November 30th, I have the screenshot from, so it was at the end of November. We had a post on his Instagram saying December 20th with a Lions logo. Now, we didn't know exactly what that meant, but a lot of people assumed he was talking about a return to the Detroit Lions. That's what a lot of us kind of speculated with that. And we did a video on that alone. And just like, hey, could this guy actually be returning? We talked about kind of a video that a doctor put out there of like, okay, how long will it take? That kind of thing. And as Dan Campbell said today, he is one of the X-Men. This guy, and give him a lot of credit. By the way, shout out to Ceedy Duce for this because we talk about his impact on our team. You also look at his future outlook. He's trying to land that extension, a long-term deal somewhere, I believe, and it didn't seem like he was able to maybe land that this offseason. He signed a one-year deal with us, and for him to battle himself back, to find himself in a possibility of playing this season, whenever that may be, just to give himself a chance, that's incredibly impressive because, again, this was a grade 3 injury that the thought was, man, this guy is out for the season. And now here we are on December 14th talking about him being medically cleared. Now, what's crazy about this, it's absolutely insane. This December 20th would be next Wednesday. As we know, in a normal week, Wednesday's the first day of practice that gets put out there for us, right? It's the first day that they list the injury report. Lions are going to have to make decisions on it, but like Dan Campbell said, he and Brad Holmes will talk about it. They want to get him back and practicing as fast as possible. And they said, look, it's secure. He's strong right now. They want to get him back out there to get some work. Next Wednesday, of course, will be the first day that you get those injury reports. I just think that's wild. I didn't even know what day that was, but we looked up like the distance between the day he was injured, between that day of returning, and it was like, man, that's going to be really pushing it. And all of a sudden, here we are, he's medically cleared. So that's the main news that I want to start off with. Shout out to Ceedy Duce for battling back. I hope he gets to play at some point this season. It honestly sounds like he will. I mean, we still have 4 games left. He's not going to play in this game, but even if he just returned to practice next week in any form, could we see him by the regular season finale to potentially just get him some looks? That way, if you can get into the playoffs, then you could potentially see him there as well. I'm just saying, I think there's a real possibility, but I just want to give him a ton of credit for battling back to make this even a possibility. That is amazing, and I'm fired up to see it, man. I love this player specifically. I said this a few times. My bold prediction coming into the year is I thought the guy would go for 6 interceptions. He'd lead the team, and we ultimately would end up extending him. Even though on paper it was like, oh, maybe we don't do that. We have safeties under contract. Tracy's under contract. We have Iffy, who I thought played well this last week. Defensive All-22 video, and I thought Iffy played really well this past week. There were some little things, but I thought he played really well. But it does seem like they maybe were saying, we want to get a look at this guy before all of a sudden Ceedy Duce returns, and then we don't know where his snaps come into play defensively. So overall, this is awesome. I'm happy for you, Ceedy Duce. I hope we get to see him soon. Now, we're still kind of awaiting the potential return of James Houston, who, you know, it sounds like he anticipates some point trying to be back this season, but we don't know yet. Jason Kabinda, we don't know yet. yet, and this really comes down to their decision on Hendon Hooker as well. Not completely, but a roster spot, right? If they want to open up a roster spot for Hendon Hooker to be signed to the final 53 next week, they're going to have to make this decision. If they don't do that, 53-man roster, after being listed this week with full participation each day, he's also listed as out for this game, but if they don't, then he won't be able to come back for the season. The Lions will have to make that decision because that will take a roster spot. That's something that they'll have to make a decision on, and a lot of that also could have to do with certain guys like Ceedy Duce, Jason Kabinda. You could throw Aleem McNeil into that mix, who they're hoping gets back as well, potentially by the end of the regular season off of IR. So we'll see what they do with that. I don't really know at this point. It's going to be a tough decision, I'm sure, but whatever it is, we'll find out. And Ceedy Duce, it sounds like he's coming back, and that's amazing. So with that being said, let's now dive into the injury report. The designations that we have so far, as always, questionables, we'll know on game day. Or maybe sometimes you'll know a little bit before if they put something out there. But as of now, here's what we know. Starting with the Lions, Taylor Decker is questionable for this game. But the positive is this: full participation from Taylor Decker today. Yesterday, limited participation. Today, full participation. I texted Easy beginning of this week when I saw that Taylor Decker did not practice, and I was like, man, if he doesn't play, I might cry a little bit. And that was being 100% truthful. Every time I see that, there's a little part of me that's like, man, don't cry. Don't cry, dog. We'll be all right. I don't know that he's going to play. He's listed as questionable. I guess there's a chance that he doesn't. He may have been dealing with this in the last game as well. Didn't think he played his best. However, you always want to have Taylor Decker out there. Always want to have Taylor Decker. I'll always take Taylor Decker over no Taylor Decker. I would love to have him on in this game specifically. I hope that we do. They have versatile, young, athletic edge defenders that can drop in coverage, rush the passer, play the run, but they have some different body types than you normally see. This will be a challenge for us, but I really hope that Taylor Decker is able to play, but there's a lot of positives with that. Benito Jones, also positives. Went from limited participation to full participation on Thursday with his neck injury. And by the way, Dan Campbell said that he's felt really good about the last 2 days of practice. I don't know how I felt about this one because we hear him before practice. But the last 2 days, he said it's been good practice. Players taking it over. Those guys running the practice. The energy's been there. And that's fantastic because after last game, he was like, man, we got to practice. He went back to practice. So Benito Jones, while he's questionable, seems like it's trending in the right direction as well. He made some good plays. Definitely go check out that All-22 we just dropped. I'm telling you, it's a good one. It's one of our best ones. Definitely go check that out. Frank Ragnow, another huge one here. Frank Ragnow, here's the positive. Went from limited participation yesterday to full participation on this Thursday. Dealing with the knee, back, toe, my man's going through everything. You hate to see that there's literally 3 things listed there, but Frank Ragnow also could be back, which would mean you'd essentially, if he plays and Decker plays, you have your starting offensive line playing, which we just have not seen a ton of. Now, as Dan Campbell put it before practice today, they weren't necessarily sure that he was going to be back because he's like, I want to make sure it doesn't flare up. Specifically, just to kind of dial in, I think, some of the offensive line things. And I say this, we talked about kind of the snap count and the false starts. I don't want to act like I'm putting that all on Graham Glasgow. I actually thought Graham did a really strong job as just a blocker in general. As a run blocker, the athleticism he showcased to seal off some blocks, springboard some of our zone rushing attack. Like, we ran the ball well. I mean, we ran the ball well against a very good run defense, and it was impressive. It was very impressive, and I give a lot of credit to Graham Glasgow for opening up some of those outside zone runs, specifically through the B gap. So I want to say that, even though we had some false start, things like that, and hopefully getting a guy like Frank Ragnow back and kind of just like without that offensive line performance, because he's a guy that you could trust, him and Goff, that thing kind of cleans up. Hopefully that's the case, and it'd also be great just to have that starting 5 really together. We haven't seen that very much. It would be fantastic now with Jonah Jackson back. Also, finally, we have Josh Reynolds. This is one that I'm not really sure on. He popped up yesterday with limited participation with a back injury, and usually it seems like when guys pop up, it probably happened during practice, and all of a sudden they're listed limited, but today he was also listed with limited participation. If that was no participation, I would assume he's not going to play, but it's limited, so maybe there is a chance that he does play in this game. I don't know where Josh Reynolds is at specifically. If he does not play, expect to see some Donovan Peoples-Jones work his way in a little bit more, because there's certain route tree things that he can do that we like to use Josh Reynolds for, like one of the sacks we took in this past game, a deep curl route on third down. We can run some of that route tree with Peoples-Jones, I believe. However, we know Goff loves to go to Josh Reynolds, and he can win one-on-one. Don't have like a top-tier corner. He can win one-on-one. However, this Denver team does have Pat Surtain, and I think he would fall into into that category as a top-tier cornerback. But with that being said, again, if Josh can't play, I would expect to see more Peoples-Jones and, of course, Jamison Williams as well. But they run a different route tree. They bring different elements, and I think that's where having a guy like Peoples-Jones was so massive when we made that trade, potentially for situations like this. Now, moving on to the other side of the ball, we have the Denver Broncos. I won't spend as much time here. We can dive into this a lot more when we do the preview, but here's what we know. Big ones, Nick Bonito is out for this game. He popped up with a knee injury. I think it was in the first quarter of that LA Chargers game. Now he's out for this game. That is a big loss of just a pure outside linebacker. He's not big, but he has a lot of slither, a lot of bend. He is a true pass rusher that can give your tackles problems about the ability to get around the outside of that pocket. That's what he was in college at Oklahoma. I was a big fan of him, and so far this season he has 44 pressures and 8 sacks. That helps. It does a little bit. Now, what they have at that edge defender position, as they have recently waived Perkins, what they do have, again, is a lot of youth there. They have guys like Baron Browning, who's come on to the scene. He was really awesome. I thought he popped a lot against the LA Chargers watching that game back, but at the same time, they also have guys like Drew Sanders, who could definitely kick down to the line of scrimmage and just rush the passer. I had wondered if that's what he was going to do in the NFL, because he was such a good pass rusher as an off-ball type of linebacker, but he also fits with the body type that a lot of those guys have. Baron Browning, that is a big loss for them, as well as Greg Dulcich, their tight end. Now, they have Adam Troutman, who's kind of their top tight end, but he's not a big receiving target. He only has 150 yards on the season. Aside of that, I would say there's not a ton of other things that stand out. PJ Locke is something to keep an eye on, but he did return in limited fashion, and now he's listed as questionable. That's their safety opposite of Justin Simmons, so we'll keep an eye on that. Quinn is going to play, who's a very good run blocker, as well as Samaje Perine, but their running back room, it starts with Javonte Williams, but that's not a bad guy to have mixed into that. Jonathan Cooper, speaking of those guys that can get on the line of scrimmage and rush, I think he has 40 pressures this season, so again, another guy that does work. I don't think when you look at this team, you think about like, man, they got Nick Bosa, but they have good edge defenders and they have a good rotation of it. We not like a high pressure team specifically, just over 19%. That's not very high. However, what they do a lot is they blitz, over 31% of the time. That's 7th in the league. Now, the positive of that is we've seen that a couple times this year, right? Everybody's different stylistically, but Kansas City blitzes a lot, and they're very creative with how they do it. Slot blitzes, defensive backs blitzing, you don't really know where it's coming from. So does Tampa Bay. They do kind of the same thing, especially if they get you into passing downs. And we handled our business in those games. Tampa Bay, we passed the ball pretty well. Kansas City was tough, but it was also the first week of the season, and now we're going to see that again. And it's not going to go anywhere because we got Minnesota twice, and they blitz more than anybody else in the league, about 47% of the time. So the blitzing isn't going anywhere. Historically, with Ben Johnson, Jared Goff, I've trusted how we've handled the blitz. It's more so about the pressure than the blitz. A quarterback, statistically, is usually productive with pressure. Everybody usually is just not good with pressure. It's just like who's worse than the other quarterback with pressure, because there's so many variables that go into it that's very difficult to measure, so those things fluctuate. We showed stats earlier this season where it was like, dude, Goff's got a higher pass rating than Patrick Mahomes under pressure, right? I mean, it just fluctuates. Everybody's bad with pressure, but against the blitz is different, and I really do have confidence with the Lions against the blitz, though Chicago gave us some problems there, and even in this past game, I think we handled certain things better than the first time around, but they gave us some problems. Those late blitzing, linebacker blitzes, Alex Singleton, he flies around. You're going to get that again in this game. They've also have a really nice slot that's come along in McMillian. Positive is you've just seen it, maybe in a different sense, but you've just seen it and it's not going anywhere, so it's something that you better prove you can deal with. But pressure is different than blitzing. I trust us a lot more against the blitz than pressure, because pressure just leads to really unexpected, usually not good results for your team. With that being said, that's really the main things to hit on there. You can see Mike Purcell looks like he's going to play. Updated injury report as of Thursday, the designations that we have so far. Again, tomorrow we may know more on certain players here that we're not sure on, and then also probably some sort of preview / prediction type of thing, maybe live stream, maybe pre-recorded. I don't know exactly right now, but we'll save that for tomorrow. For now, let me know your thoughts, comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.